I'm just trying to picture this. Somebody comes up to you to ask you your intentions about doing the dishes.
Hey guys, this is Agnibarna
And Myra.
Welcome to the Hidden Coconuts podcast,
the show that dives deep into the lives of us coconuts, brown on the outside, white on the inside.
or in other words, those of us who identify as both South Asian and North American, juggling two identities, contemplating how they coexist.
If you empathize, or you were just in the neighborhood, stick around and let's get cracking our inner coconuts.
Okay, we have another wonderful, beautiful guest with us today. She considers herself a short brownie, but hasn't measured herself in a hot minute. She loves music, dancing, reading, and spending time with her friends and family. She's just like us, entering her third year of university, continuing her studies in psychology and thanatology. I'm happy to introduce Namita Patel here with us today. Namita, how are you?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Welcome to the Hidden Coconuts podcast. Myra and I, for those of you who don't know, we've known Namita for a while. I think I've known her for longer than Myra.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I
yeah.
think Aggie and I go back to high school.
Elementary school.
Oh, sorry, elementary school. I meant elementary school.
It's interesting to reconnect with familiar faces who've kind of gotten a barrier between us because of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And literally the last time I've talked to you was before COVID. So this is a nice way to catch up.
Yeah, it feels like we've been distanced, literally, as well.
Yes, exactly.
Namita and I actually still live in the same neighborhood. So we used to go on bike rides during the summer and vent a lot. And actually one time we were venting and we're just like, you know what? We should do a podcast.
Really?
Yes, actually we did. We were just venting, like Myra said. And one day we were like, you know what? We're decent speakers. What if we made a podcast? And I was like, and she was like, that's a solid idea.
But we just never really did that, especially because university came and just killed our social lives. But yeah, I'm so thrilled that you're here, Namita. Can finally make that dream, in a sense, come true.
That is true. It's partially true right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because your mom's from South Africa?
Yes. But I guess so. Basically what I'm saying is ethnicity wise, I'm Indian.
Right.
But would it be nationality? I'm not sure. I would be
then
African.
Nationality.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
So you lived in South Africa, and then at what age did you move to Canada?
I was around 12 years old.
Mm-hmm. And how did it feel switching, because again, that's a big move. You're going from one side of the world to the other. How was that transition? What was it like?
Definitely was interesting. Also because of my age, it was just a weird time, I guess, for me to move, because I feel like the best time if you wanted to move to a different country with your family would be if your child isn't born, or if they're super, super young, still in kindergarten or something, or they're completely grown-ups and adults. But I was in a phase of just about to being a teenager. So it was really honestly hard for me. I would always be criticized and judged. I guess judging is not only in our Asian culture, but here in the Western world as well, of how I would be saying things or pronouncing words. Even till this day, I get judged on it, but I feel more in grade 8 when I moved here, I was more so mocked, and it made me feel so inferior and I was doing something wrong. But it's I never ever shared that with anyone, not even my parents. So my parents couldn't even at the time be oh, Namita, that's fine. That's how you've been brought up. It's normal. It's a South African kind of culture. These people are used to their culture. And so you shouldn't be ashamed of it. But by the time I realized that, I was 15, 16 in high school already. And I was you know what, this is who I am. This is how things are done from when I was a young age. And so I shouldn't be ashamed of it or feeling inferior, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And if you think about it, you're learning a whole language in a different culture. You're not expected to be perfect, but also that is a really hard thing to do. Anyone else in that grade 8 class at that time, they probably don't have that perspective. So that's why it's easier for them to mock. But if any one of those people were faced with a challenge like that, where they're in a completely new environment and have to learn a new language, they would be in the same spot, maybe even doing worse. So it's really like sad to see that kind of mocking happen just because there's a huge process behind it. And
Exactly.
yeah. And I also like work with kids and I teach them French and English, but I have some kids that actually are refugees from the Ukraine and they're learning English currently. And sure, their English sounds funny. Maybe they say a word wrong. It's not right to laugh at it, but in fact, the more you understand their story and where they come from, it makes you feel sympathetic in a sense because there's this whole story where they've been forced to move out of their homes and adapt to this. So it's very encouraging.
Yes, and like at that point when you're an immigrant, it's like your main goal is to settle down and get used to your surroundings. And it's like if you can't even do that in a simple way, you have people like on top of you constantly, like it makes it 10 times worse. And I remember when that would be happening, I made myself like a introvert and now everyone knows me as being an introvert. And at that time I felt so bad that people would be calling me an introvert. Like it's kind of like I guess the inferior kind of personality and like extroverts are like, way better of a personality. But as I grew up, I'm like, no, it's not. Like there's two personalities for a reason. Like it's fine to be, for example, an introvert, but I kind of hate the way that I became an introvert because it was of people in my surrounding at the time that were making me feel inferior. And so I just quote unquote like stopped talking. And I was like, okay, if I just don't talk, like I won't be mocked or like laughed at. You know what I mean?
Yes. Also, just the age you came to Canada, like 12, it's like an awkward age. You already have beliefs. You're old enough to have a sense of self, like an identity of yourself, but also it's that
Now it has to
pinnacle
change.
point where you're starting to change and you realize that the beliefs and morals so far you've had was a direct influence of your environment, but you're growing up and it's like a vase. So you were born with a certain vase, but when you become a tween, that vase breaks. And it's basically how you're going to reshape and remold the vase into your own unique vase, however you say it. Does that make sense?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So I'm curious, because you grew up in one culture and you came here at an age where you felt like you had to conceal part of yourself or completely just to fit in or not
Mm.
be mocked in a sense. Do you think that's affected just who you are today? And do you think you are more comfortable embracing both cultures or a certain culture? Do you think you've found a part of you in the culture today here?
Oh yeah, it's definitely affected me. Like I said, now I've been deemed to like be kind of like an introvert and I kind of am if I'm in big groups and stuff like that. So I guess I used to see that as like a negative impact of me moving here, but now I see it as a positive. And at the same time now, whereas when I moved here, I would try to like, as you said, conceal my South African upbringing and that culture that I've been with for like 12 years. But now it's like if I need to mention it, if I need to talk on it, I will be more than happy to talk about it and try to shed light on that. I'm from here. It's totally normal that I do this, or these are the things that I have been doing since I'm a young kid, and so forth. So, yeah, I try to stay almost balanced because it's like I don't even have two cultures, almost like three now, because it's like I'm Indian and then there's the Canadian side and then there's the South African side.
Right.
And so it's like I have to try and balance all of that. Like if I'm talking to an Indian person, it's like, oh, okay, now I need to like not almost like switch, but it's like, oh, now I need to, I don't know what word I can use, but I'm just gonna say, for example, behave in like, an Indian way, which is totally normal. Like I'll be doing totally normal Indian stuff, whether it be like talking in my language or dancing in my culture and stuff like that. And then if I'm in like in the Canadian culture, it's like, oh, like I have to pay attention to like how I'm saying certain words, like with pronunciation and stuff like that, if that makes any sense.
That does. And I'm bringing the cake metaphor back. It's like a cake. Like an entire cake is you. Each slice is a different version of you. And if there's a group of people, with one person, you're not going to share every single slice of the cake. If you like them, you might share 3 or 4 slices, but you'll always hold back one slice for yourself.
Yes, exactly. That's a great metaphor, actually.
I found that so inspiring, and it's amazing that you acknowledge that at such a young age that there's 3 different parts to you, yet they kind of interconnect, and that's what makes Namita Namita. So
Yes.
and I'm thrilled to see somebody else in psychology. And I just want to know what you think about it so far.
Honestly, I'm really enjoying it. I definitely think if you take the introductory course in first year, you don't really get a gist of really what psychology is. And I've noticed that because if people have taken Psychology 1000 in the first year, they'd be like, oh, it's like memorization. Because first year, like you try to cover like almost 12 chapters of courses that are separate from second year onwards.
Right.
I kind of agree with them saying that it becomes like more memorization in first year. But once you like go more into a specific course, for example, sensation and perception, like you're only learning about our visual system or our auditory system. And it's just so much more interesting than first year, what you get, a little glimpse of. But so far, I've been enjoying it. And what about you? Because you're, I think, doing a honors specialization in it.
Yes. So specialization is like a step above major. So like my sole degree is on psychology. And exactly what you said. The first year is kind of like a run over, like a shallow treading over each generic branch of psychology. But once you like get into one, like grasp onto one of the branches and you go deep into it, there's like so much to learn and there's so many layers to it and so many theories behind it.
For example, like my sensation and perception course that I took last year, we did like the visual system, auditory system, olfaction system, like all our senses basically. And it's like we literally go to the like itty bitty graining information of like,
Cones and rods.
yeah. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. Like I've never thought of even going so much into detail about all these systems that we have.
Right. And psychology is not just about do I have anxiety or do I have OCD? It's also about why am I seeing this image in front of me or why am I thinking this screen, this mumbo jumbo of shapes? Why does my brain think it looks like a pen? You know?
Yes, yes. How we like analyze things basically.
Yes.
The fact that I actually know what you guys are talking about makes me feel proud. It's true. It's just such a diverse field that I think people don't quite understand until they go into it and start exploring it for themselves.
Yeah, like it's literally the whole study of like human behavior. Like for example, like doctors are studying like all the systems within a human. We're just looking at it from a whole different angle and it's more focused on our behavior and going down to like the cellular basis of that basically.
Hmm. So, what do you think is like your favorite part or like layer of psychology personally?
Honestly, I don't even really have an answer for you because everything is so new that I learned that it's never existed to me before. So everything that I learn is new, but that's the part that I find enjoyment in. It's all new and fascinating about us humans. And besides like the stress that university puts on us by getting it done by certain deadlines and all of that, I literally even mentioned this once to my parents. I was like, if I was studying this without like a 4 month cram period, I would be enjoying this 1,000 times more. Not that I wasn't during the
Yes.
but like if I'm having more time to like absorb all the information that's being taught in like one lesson, like I would definitely appreciate it like way more.
For sure.
And you're also minoring in thanatology, yes?
Yes, that's correct.
How'd that come about? Because that's not a common field. Like, it's not something you're just going to casually bring up in a conversation. That's really interesting that you went into that. How'd that come about?
That was actually thanks to the elective I took in first year as well. I took a couple of electives besides taking like the required courses I needed in first year. Like I took disability studies and sociology and thanatology and anthropology, linguistics-ish kind of. So like I was like, okay, so if I want to do a minor, it's like I can probably choose something from the electives I've taken. And I was like, which one did I enjoy the most? And I really enjoyed the introductory course for thanatology. And so I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to minor in this because, at least for me, it's fascinating almost as much as I shouldn't be saying that. Just how like our body reacts to loss or just things that we go through during the grieving or bereavement time. So yeah.
I think that's really cool because it's not like a common field. So I feel like society can use more understanding of that and you can like play a very key role in delivering that knowledge to people.
Yeah, what Myra said, it's a really different yet a very important topic that people should be, I guess, a little bit more aware of, that there are people grieve in different ways. And at least in brown culture in general, there's a stereotype around how people are expected to grieve, where guys are supposed to be these stones who can't show their expressions. And God forbid, if a guy's wife dies right after, he needs to go find another wife. And whereas on the other hand, women are kind of pictured as these wailing, kind of sobbing
Emotional, like,
messes.
yeah, like they're super emotional.
Yes. And I don't know if you know this, but like just going off of like Bangladeshi Muslim culture, women aren't allowed to go into like funerals or graveyards for this specific reason, that they are too loud and they cause too much of a scene to be entering such a quote unquote peaceful place.
Actually, that's the same in my culture as well. Us women aren't allowed to attend like the ceremonies and rituals that occur. It's like all the men go. And once I found that out, I was like, that's insane. Like, can you imagine, like, for example, like your father dying and you can't attend those rituals? I think it's insane and mind boggling that that's such a thing that's being put forth in our culture. But yeah, no, I agree with you. Like, also the topic of like death is also like super taboo.
Yes.
Not only like the typical stereotypes that we've mentioned arise, but just the taboo of it. So like not trying to talk about it too much or avoiding it if you can, where in reality it's like living is like, by the end of it you're gonna die. As much as we like to believe we're immortal, we're not.
Right. It's inevitable.
Exactly. And so I just think like studying it, at least for me, in conversations when I talk with people, if it ever comes about, I can definitely share that knowledge, like Myra said, and shed more light onto it and hopefully make people more aware that it's not a taboo kind of topic.
Yeah, and there's also not just one way to grieve about something. Like I know in our gossipy culture, people love to like criticize other people and being like, "Oh, this person's relative just recently passed. What is she doing at a party?" Or, "Oh, this person's relative passed away like 2 years ago. Why is she still moping about it?" You know what I mean? Like you can't do anything without having to carry the guilt by
Exactly.
society.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're talking about. It's super like like almost natural for our people in our culture to be gossiping about so and so in the community, and it's like it drives me insane. Like I always tell my parents this, like if their friends are talking about someone else and I'm like, it's their life. We have like no right to discuss it or worry about them so much. Like how about we worry about ourselves and like, let them do their thing. But like you said, grief has like no time period. It's literally endless. Like you could have lost a parent or a family member 20 years ago and you can still be grieving about it. It's just if you don't show it out in public too much, it seems unusual if you do see someone who's grieving 20 years after someone has died.
Right. It's not about getting over it, rather it's growing around it and
Yeah.
just, yeah.
And it's just an unrealistic expectation to tell people that they shouldn't be grieving after time because it is, such a huge event that affects obviously the rest of their life. Like it has ripple effects.
Yeah, and it's like the loss is huge. Like usually the effects of it from the outside perspective like doesn't seem too big almost. I don't know if that's making sense. But it's like you've lost not only like a human being, but you've lost everything that comes with it. So you've lost love, you've lost that relationship, you've lost their advice that would be given to you, for example, if they were someone really important in that kind of aspect. There's just like many layers to it, like you said, that make the grieving process longer than one would expect it to last, although it can last forever almost.
Yeah, and just going off of that, like I know in Asia, the family ties I would believe are much stronger. Like not only are families bigger, but the dependency and the connections and the relationship between families is very strong. So like they visit each other often, they do each other favors, like even
Yeah.
if you have like a second cousin, like they're still in touch. So the fact that there's such a reliance on family makes losing them even harder.
Yes, exactly. That's true.
Like I honestly didn't really experience any of that until 2019. And that's when my aunt died, and basically my mom's second mom, because my mom lost her mom at a young age. So her sister, aka my aunt, did a lot of the stuff that, a parent would. So I didn't really understand how much of an effect that had on my mom until my aunt died because my mom crumbled. Like, it was rough. And every time we'd mention her, she would just start crying. And I guess it really broadened my perspective. I wasn't able to see how special that connection was, I guess.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's like basically your aunt filled the void of not having a mother to your mother. So it's like it was a huge loss for her.
Yeah, and it was crazy. Like, the whole community, everyone loved my aunt. And after she died, the amount of people that came to visit and support, it was just insane. So I think it's interesting because before you guys were talking about the culture and how women aren't allowed to go to rituals and like funerals and visit the grave. I did not know if that was a thing, which I find very interesting because I was able to go visit my aunt's grave and everything. Like, I think women are allowed? Question mark.
I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure we might be able to go to the graveyard. I just know for sure that rituals that have to happen within, I don't know, like a week or 2 weeks, a woman can't attend some of those.
Oh,
Yeah, just going off of that, at least from my personal knowledge, Myra, what you said about the grief and your mom, I can also relate to that. I lost my grandfather last year, and that kind of like strong, unconditional tie with him was what my mom had. So that's when I witnessed the crumbling point for my mom. And I was able to be a part of all the regulations and stuff that had to be done for his burial. And we were there. My grandfather had a lot of sisters. They were there. My aunt and I were there. But all the women were like far away in the back while all the men did the burying. They did all the prayers. Women weren't allowed to participate in the prayers either. And we were just kind of expected to be in the background wailing, like crying. So
Mhm.
I guess it also depends on how much you believe in these older rituals or like older practices. If you were to ask a senior Bangladeshi, they would say, no, women aren't allowed because they're too dramatic. But if you ask a younger generation Bangladeshi, they'd be like, who cares? Or like, why aren't men able to cry?
Yeah. Since you guys are both talking about your moms, it just reminded me my great grandmother had passed away like in 2016, 2017-ish. And actually, I know she had a super, super close relationship with her because they grew up together. And like my great grandmother was like a mother to her when she was growing up. But the thing is, I never saw her truly, truly break down now that I actually try to do a flashback. I was actually the one that was not hysterical, but I was crying a lot and I was heartbroken because it was the first like death loss that I experienced. But then that made me think that I was like, oh, is that also like the stereotype that, oh, moms need to be strong for the children and like not try to show when they're weak and broken down? And I was like, that's really interesting because that's not how it should be. Like emotions are emotions and we should let them flow despite the relationship, the age, or even the gender.
Right. And this is a heavier episode than the ones we've had before, but it's so necessary to go over these kinds of topics. And while we are talking about death, my personal first experience with death was when I was 11, when my dad passed away. So I found out one morning, my mom just woke me up and just softly said that your dad passed away. The cancer was too strong for him. And it was a huge, like, it was like a bucket of ice water. It just fell on me, and I hadn't been in good contact with my dad for the past year because he kind of chose to distance away from us after getting the divorce. And as a result, that bond I had with my dad kind of crumbled a year before he passed away, but still I couldn't believe it. And being like this person from a brown community, I was like, what will people think of me now? Like, I don't have a dad. For the longest time, I was scared to feel out of place from my community that's already so prone to gossip. And they already saw my mom in such a bad light because she divorced my dad. So that's just like this underlying misogyny. So for like the longest time, I think I started being able to talk freely that, yes, this happened to me. My dad passed away and I grew up with one parent when I was like 16. So I kept it to myself for 4-ish years because of the whole brown people society thing and feeling different and out of place from the community.
Yeah, that's that's one side of the community thing that I'm not a fan of, that if you have say, for example, opinions or situations that you've experienced that are not quote unquote typical to how life should be, is like you have to keep quiet or like you have to hide it and like not let anyone know. And I'm like, that's crazy. I remember being younger and like some aunts and them would be like, oh no, like you can't say that, or like don't even think like that. Like people should know, like this is how we've been doing things, or this is what has happened to us. And I'm like, that's honestly so crazy and it shouldn't be like that.
For sure. And that's literally why I have the social anxiety I have right now, because
Mhm.
growing up, we were expected to be this certain way. And even our parents or our grandparents would tell us stuff like, oh, if you behave like this, or oh, if you throw a tantrum, then I'm going to go tell your teacher that you're not this perfect angel that she thinks you are. And for a 5-year-old is going to throw tantrums. They're not going to want to eat their food. So, like, by telling them that their teacher thinks of them as this perfect angel being, they're going to try to be this perfect angel being and end up growing up with this underlying anxiety of that, like the people pleasing mindset. You're going to grow up with this
Yeah,
need to please others and not put them up before yourself,
yeah,
which is like a typical Hindi serial main character. But women are so far from that.
exactly. Like we've been grown up like in this environment of being like, you need to be 100% overall. Like you should be able to do this and be good at this and behave like this and think like this. And that will basically make you a perfect human being. And especially if you're female, it will make you almost like wife worthy. And I'm like, what?
That's such a good point. There's a huge focus on becoming like wifey material. That is the urban term. But
Sure.
like you grow up and literally aunties have their eyes on you ever since you turn like 12. Oh, like she does the dishes. Okay. She might be good for my son. But
Well, she doesn't do the dishes, but then you're at the and you're 12 years old.
exactly. I think there's so much focus on just becoming that mother figure or like just the person that takes care of the house, which like women are allowed to do that by choice and whatnot, but there's just such a focus in that culture that that is the designated role for women. There's just no wiggle room.
Yeah, it's like a super heavy emphasis on it that's being put for us.
Hmm.
I'm going to put a side comment in there because this just kind of reminded me of something. So back when I was 14, we had a couple of guests come over, my mom's friend, and I like helping, even if it's the bare minimum, I like doing something. So I was just casually washing the dishes after everyone had the lunch, and the auntie comes up to me and she just casually mentions, oh, are you doing the dishes because you like to do it, or is it because just to show us that you do it?
What? That used to actually happen to like my cousins in my family. Like if visitors were coming over, like their moms would be like, "Oh, like you need to help me with the dishes once you're done," and like they barely helped with the dishes on like a regular basis. So it was kind of like a show almost for the society. So then once those visitors leave, then if they had to ever gossip to someone about their daughter, like they would seem almost quote unquote perfect or doing amazing for their age because they're helping in the kitchen and they seem interested in doing all these kind of stereotypical chores, I guess.
Right. It's just a whole different level of shallow to actually ask if it's for show or if it's real, was what I thought at the moment. But
Yeah.
yeah, just you
Yeah,
wouldn't ask a
super
guy.
Like I'm just trying to picture this. Somebody comes up to you to ask you your intentions about doing the dishes.
Yeah, as funny as it sounds, it's probably really, really true.
So we've talked about a lot of auntie hobbies. So one of them is judging people, gossiping. Number two, finding out why they're doing the dishes. Number three, they also like to set up the younger generation of kids for like marriage. Like literally whenever we have people over now, I have an older brother. So they literally start asking like, should we find a girl for you? And it's just the most uncomfortable thing. Like why? Why do you care so much?
No, I feel you. Yeah, that has happened.
It's like a group thing. It's like a group project. You have operation or mission, find this person, a person. I, my mom and I binged on the show called Indian Matchmaking. Have you heard of it? It's on Netflix, and it's like a documentary where a matchmaker tries to find coconuts or Indian youth in India, like a partner.
Yeah, I think
They-
I've heard of the show, but I haven't watched it.
Yeah, so just the people who are relying on their parents, specifically the guys who are relying on their parents to find them a girl, there's so much like underlying misogyny and patriarchy. The woman has to be slim, the woman has to be fair, the woman has to be working, the woman has to be cultured, the woman has to be at home to service the family. Well, on the other hand, in America, the coconuts there are educated and well established in their life, and they're like extremely picky with their men, which is where proof of this idea that men have of not to let women get too far in their life or get too educated, marry them young, or if they, at a certain point, if they get too educated, they realize that men are basically useless.
And that is true, yeah. I didn't think of it from that perspective, that that could be a possible reason that a woman like should be getting married early, or like some of them, like I know some of the families will tell like the daughter-in-laws to like stop studying and stuff like that. I'm like, what? Just so that the husband can be like the breadwinner of the house.
That's kind of insane. Like, sure, if you want to provide for your family, by all means, but why are you stopping other people from getting an education and getting an income? Like, their education doesn't affect what you do. You know, you don't depend on that.
Yeah, like the females have their own hopes and dreams that they want to accomplish in life. They have goals. And it's like if your husband or your husband's side of the family is like pressuring you to stop and not, that's concerning.
For sure. Like, if it was a personal thing, like, I don't think I would want to get married to someone who wouldn't let me have those kind of opportunities.
Yeah, same.
So, just in brown culture, the idea of arranged marriage is very common, and it's kind of become this fun thing where people are proud to say that they didn't even meet their spouse or see the spouse anytime before the wedding. So, what do you think about that as a
Actually,
coconut? Yeah, so people take pride in that. I didn't even see my husband the day before our wedding. Our parents did the talking. His parents saw me and they liked me. So the guy had literally no say. He just showed up at the wedding on the wedding day.
oh, no, that's the first time actually I've heard that. Usually, arranged marriages, like in my family, like we are allowed to see the guy and like spend time with them a little bit so we can get to know them and then we can decide. And it's like maybe some aunts and uncles in my family will make the actual decision, but some of them will just let the children decide if they want to get married to that person or not. But they find it arranged in the sense that they found the guy and like the girl has no idea that this guy existed, and so they would still call it like an arranged marriage. But I've never heard of like, oh, they haven't seen each other and they're getting married.
I think it really depends per person. Like, I know that some people, they get together with other families, they talk things through. Other people just see a picture of someone and they're like, okay. So there's a huge range within arranged marriages for sure. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, like I know for one, my parents actually have an arranged marriage. And oh my God, I love to shock white people with this fact all the time. But they're cousins. Have you ever played the game Two Truths and a Lie?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so I love using that fact that my parents are cousins as one of the truths because everyone's like, whoa, like, no way, like, they have to be like fifth cousins or something. What? And then they find out that it's the truth and they're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. But I think it's so wild because marriage in this society is just so different from marriage there. Like, you can marry people from your family, that's one thing. Another thing is like it's seen as more of an alliance between families too. Like people want to make sure that they're marrying into a good family, maybe of good status or something. Whereas here, it doesn't matter as much. And you can also get to know the person more intimately before marriage here. So I think it's really interesting to see the different aspects of marriage in both the cultures.
Yeah, and marriage is a topic for like way down the road. Even if you're dating someone, you have to like get to know them, get to know their quirks. Like if you're really serious about it, maybe even move in to see if you can even live together. But whereas in like South Asia, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, the Maldives, Bhutan, what they tend to do is if you like someone, bam, you're married. Like you don't even have time to think about it because according to them, the more you think, the more you get suspicious or the more you start having doubts. So like you just have to jump right into it.
I see where you're coming from. At least for me, though, like for our culture, like India, we don't marry within the family, but like they definitely look at like, oh, are they stable? If it's a total different person that we've never met, like financially and I guess personality wise and stuff like that. But Yeah, I guess since Myra, you were talking about your parents, I feel like my parents' story is also like crazy almost. But now that Aggie mentioned that like people don't even see each other before they get married, I'm like, now is my parents' story a little odd? But my mom actually had gone to India for vacation, and apparently like my aunts and uncles in the family were like, oh, like we're here, we might as well look for like, a boy. And she was like, no, like that's not my goal. I came to like, relax and like enjoy the vacation. But anyways, and then they show a picture of my dad to my mom, and then she was like, okay, like since you guys are like pressuring me so much, like I'll go and see him. And then so they met up, and then the next day, like they made the decision, like the families, they were like, oh, actually, you know what? They seem like they would be a good match. So they're getting married. And after that decision, like literally 2 weeks later, they got married. And then my mom flew back to South Africa. And basically, she went for vacation for 2 weeks and she came back married.
That's insane.
Like, I don't know. Like, basically, like our arranged marriages those days were, I feel like, more insane than now. Like, I feel like now there might be more flexibilities. Like, you will find it very rare, I feel like, where the girl hasn't seen the person they're going to marry like the day before, like.
Hmm.
Like they would have at least seen them or like spoken to them or like spend time with them. I feel like now arranged marriage is like slightly changing for the better, if that makes sense.
I agree. Yeah, no, it's definitely a more old school practice to not see your significant other before the marriage. Yeah, that's
Or like
definitely
even
changing.
barely know them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I personally can't relate. My parents actually didn't have an arranged marriage. It was by their choice. But just going off of like that arranged marriage thing, yeah. So what I've noticed is parents are starting to call it like as a setup. Like you're just setting each other up like on a blind date. You meet each other, you talk, and it's up to the kids if they want to spend the rest of their lives with each other. Before it was like the parents' decision, but now
Yes.
it's becoming the kids' choice.
Yes, that's literally the best way to put it. Blind date. Because I feel like people have the misconception of it being like a forced marriage, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Which I guess like maybe in those days it kind of makes sense that people have those opinions and perspective of arranged marriages being forced, but it's really not, because like you're given the option of who you want to marry out of like the guys or the girls that they show you.
Right. Oh, I have a story about this.
Sure.
Sorry, I was just looking for the clear. Okay. So basically, have you heard all the stuff with tampons and diva cups and stuff for women? How like you shouldn't put something in there, what if your hymen rips?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so in the olden medieval times, at least in like North America and Europe, for like kings and queens, there would be like a witness in the room when they're consummating the marriage just to make sure the woman was quote unquote pure. They do the same thing even in South Asia to this day. That's kind of what my mom was like talking to me a couple of days about, how if I end up marrying a brown guy, I have to be aware of his family because their family might be like the toxic type. Because in brown culture, you live with your extended family. You move into your husband's house with his parents, his siblings, yada yada yada. And by chance, if there's a good female population in there, the day after your wedding night, they're gonna check the sheets to see if there's blood to make sure you're pure, quote unquote pure.
Oh, that's the first time I'm hearing that.
Same.
Yeah, so like the underlying toxicity, even within families, it's just women, man. They have
Yeah, I
no.
know. They make us like such a complex gender for no reason almost.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, if we're going to talk about purity, that does go both ways. The only thing is that you can have a visual identification when it comes to women.
Right? Like people don't even bat an eye. Oh, the guys had a partner before. Psh, okay. Why does the guy have to be the most experienced one? Like any kind of story or any kind of thing, piece of media you watch, it's the guy teaching the woman, oh, I'll show you the world. But dude, why can't the woman show the world?
Yeah, exactly. That is true. Yeah.
And I wrote an essay about this in one of my biopsychology classes. It's like guys are, even like within their family, within their dads and brothers, they're celebrated by their partners or what they've done to females, whereas women are kind of ashamed, bashed, abandoned, shunned for whatever they do. So like whatever women do, they're shunned for, guys are celebrated for it.
Exactly. Yeah. It would be for the exact same thing. Like if a woman had done it, like she should be able to do that. But if a guy did it and it's something that men usually don't do, it's like, oh my God, like a round of applause, please.
It's just such a double standard because I get that a lot of their beliefs or values come probably from religion. Like when it comes to marriage, the whole thing about, not having a relationship before marriage is a religious thing, which is great. I'm all for it. In fact, I believe in that. But I think the problem comes when those standards and those beliefs are not applied equally.
Yeah, so basically, after a certain point, they start to blend in religion with culture. So a lot of stuff that they call it's part of religion, it's not. It's basically their culture. So sneaking in and checking the sheets to make sure the woman has blood, that's not religion, that's culture.
Yeah, there's like a difference, a clear difference.
For sure. Thank you for wording that much better than I did.
Actually, you guys talking about this reminded me, there's a Hindi movie called, I think, Dil Dharakne Do or something like that. I haven't watched it, but there's a clip of it that made, I guess, the movie like more well known. And I can't remember the dialogues exactly, but the husband of like Priyanka Chopra in the movie was like, oh yeah, like of course, like I allow her to do that. And the other guy, just like a friend or someone, was like, what do you mean you allow her? Like she should be able to do that. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So that's just like an example of like how it's not equal between genders in like our culture, I guess, or religion.
Yeah, and we are talking about it as if it only happens in South Asia, but that effect is also brought in to us when we move or we immigrate to North America or Europe or any non-brown country.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe sleepovers, for example. Even like I'm pretty sure in culture here as well. Parents are more iffy to send their daughters to a sleepover than they are for a guy. And there might be like good causes for that. They don't know the condition of the family there, and they don't know like how maybe the men of the household they're going to are. But that can also be applied to boys as well. Because boys are seen as this like rough housing, tough guys. Even a baby, like you don't know the anatomy of a baby, but you dress them in masculine or feminine clothes, they will be treated differently accordingly. So yeah, even here for stuff like sleepovers or sports or stuff, there's an underlying amount of sexism.
Yes.
Yo, that makes so much sense. I remember reaching like the age of 10 and my parents were like, yeah, no, you're not having sleepovers anymore. And I just couldn't understand that at the time. I'm like, why? I never really understood at that age, but when you get older, it's kind of like, oh.
They have their reasons.
Yeah, but also, okay, one more thing. I think I saw a TikTok about it where a coconut, like a Indian American girl, she was wearing like a low cut top and she was wearing it and her mom was like, no, go change. Your uncle is coming over. And so basically, like, why are you even bringing over this specific uncle who thinks that way to your house?
Exactly. Like if the son had been wearing like a sleeveless
Even if
top.
he was shirtless, if he just had a towel around him, no one would bat an eye.
That's true, yeah. Or even that, but I was just going to the extent of like he's wearing like a sleeveless top. It would be fine, like like he's showing skin. But for us, like you said, maybe it's like a, I don't know, a tank top or something, or a crop top. If you think about it, our Indian wear, we literally wear blouses, like for female. That shows like
Yes.
half of our like stomach. So like, it like
Yes.
makes no sense.
In an underlying way, we're perpetuating this predatory kind of mindset because instead of teaching boys from a young age, like the proper ways of having thoughts and stuff, we're just teaching women what not to do. So instead of teaching guys to not look at people a certain way or stuff like that, we're teaching girls like dress a certain way. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's literally it. It should be more taught into boys how to view us girls in like a non-appealing or
Sexual
sexual
way.
way.
Yes.
Modesty goes both ways, right? It's one thing for girls to maybe cover up, to try to avoid having those looks, but at the same time, it's just as crucial, just as important, if not more, for guys to also try not to look and be predatory towards women. Like that is also a choice.
Exactly. Like we could totally think the same way towards guys, but we don't because we're brought up to not think that way 24/7.
We don't have the synaptic connections to do that. It literally doesn't even cross in our mind because we weren't
Exactly.
raised that way. We were instead raised to think of like ourselves and kind of be in this uncomfortable shell thinking people are ogling us 24/7, which in a way they might be, which is even scarier.
Yeah. Like the point is we just all have to try, in one way or another. We can all do something to avoid this kind of stuff. It's our choices that define what happens.
Yes.
But going around and blaming a girl that, oh, you shouldn't have worn that skirt or else you wouldn't have gotten raped, that doesn't make sense either. Because even if
No.
somebody was like completely covered, people with niqabs, they also are prone to getting raped, you know?
Yeah, no, there's definitely a problem that's not with the girls in their clothing.
Exactly.
I don't want to say anything too harsh or anything, but it's just that I don't understand how people think they have the right to do stuff as much as even look at someone in a shameful way. I don't understand. There's people that try to pull hijabs off of women. Other times, girls have been raped. I just don't understand how somebody can think that they have the power to do that. That's like a huge
Yes.
sickness in our society.
Again, with the double standard. If you cover your hair, people will try to pull it off and like see your hair. If you're wearing too short of a skirt, people are going to blame you and be like, wear something longer.
Exactly. Like they're never going to be satisfied. There's just always going to be judgment. It's like a parallel with the brown culture in general. There's just always something to roast us about.
Yeah. That's true. There's like no angle from where you can be looked at as like a regular human being. And so like my dad, he's always been like telling me since I've been growing up, don't worry about other people's opinions because you're never going to be able to satisfy other people's opinions. There's always going to be one negative thing towards you that people are thinking about you.
Exactly. People are going to judge you anyway, so might as well be judged while doing something that makes you happy, you know? Might as well be happy and be judged instead of being miserable.
Exactly.
It's just kind of sad how it took, at least for me, took me a long time to realize that there's always going to be judgment. So the longer that you stay in that cycle and you feed into it, it's not going to do you any good. So get out of there as fast as you can, is my advice.
No, yeah, I totally agree. I even didn't realize it too long ago. I'm like, you know what? We can't escape it. Like, we're always getting judged, or there's always like a negative outlook that people will have on you, and you can't beat it. Just by being you and ignoring them and living your life and not worrying about other people's opinions is the best way that you can just live your life and be carefree and just be more happy and fulfilled in life, basically.
Yeah, if that includes crying from your grief in public, so be it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And again, crying is a natural human response because before we're Canadian or before we're Pakistani or Bengali or Indian, we are human. And this is what we are designed to do when we face rough situations. So nobody should be trying to restrict us or stopping us from doing something that is meant to happen. This is how we cope, and it's not wrong.
Exactly. It's just because that emotion of crying has been either constricted too much, for example, in boys, or shown too much in women, it becomes like a no, like no. You can't cry, you can't show it. Like you have to be strong.
Exactly. And even when it's not about grief in general, you've probably heard the term calling somebody a crybaby. That used to scare me so much. I was so afraid to cry for any reason at school, especially, but in public, just because I didn't want to be called a crybaby. But again, we cry because we feel hurt or something, right? If you force yourself to cry, like that's something different, whatever.
We're not talking about that, but no, like the natural like response of crying. Yeah, crybaby was, even when I was growing up in South Africa, was like a huge kind of bully kind of term, if that makes sense. Like if someone wanted to bully you, then be like, oh, like look, it's the crybaby. And like I would hear that in my surroundings and I'd be like, oh my gosh, okay, so I can't cry or I'm gonna get hurt like badly.
Like one way or another, you get hurt.
Exactly.
I just want to take the time to appreciate you, and I just hope you know that you're honestly amazing. I heard your laugh. Your laugh is like the best laugh I've ever heard, just saying.
Oh my god.
Okay. But introvert or extrovert, Indian, South African, or Canadian, whatever you choose to call yourself, you're unique in your own way. And that's what makes you so special. So thank you so much for bringing your story and your experiences to the table. They were so awesome to hear. We really appreciate you sharing them with us. And know that you have our love and support. And yeah,
I'm honored because you mentioned that these things you didn't even mention to your parents before, but you felt comfortable enough to share with us. So, yeah, thank you for sharing it. And I know a lot of people listening will also be able to connect with you and feel less alone.
Thank you guys. I'm so happy I was able to partake in the podcast that you guys have created. It's awesome so far. And I hope you guys go far, far, far in this quest and become super successful.
Literally drop by anytime. We'd love to have you back and love to talk more because you said you have a lot of stories. We're aware of that. And we want to know more whenever you want. Just the form is right there.
Will do, will do.
You've reached the end of another episode of The Hidden Coconuts. Thanks for listening.
be sure to check out our Instagram at The Hidden Coconuts for bloopers, more of our wandering thoughts, and a chance to be a guest on our show. We love to discuss and tackle everyday coconut quandaries, so stay tuned, and we'll see you on top of the coconut tree soon.